All right, everybody, welcome back to Horn Takes Live. I'm your host, Sean Redfern. Man, I like that intro music. I got to make a video or something. Get this intro a little bit nice. I'm still an amateur. Guys, we got 18 days until college football. That is nothing. You can do anything for 18 days, including wait for college football. And really, we don't even have to wait 18 days for college football. I don't know what the official number is, but we're not far away, folks. I was on Old Man Nate's show last night. Check him out on YouTube. We talked about the Big 12. Actually, talked about the Pac-12 demise. Talked about the Big 12, the new Big 12. Talked about Texas and Oklahoma going into the SEC some more, and then we kind of went round robin and talked a little bit about who we think's going to win each conference and who might be a dark horse in each conference. So if you get a chance, go to YouTube, check out Old Man Nate. You can check us out on Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook, all at Horn Takes. Latest recruiting news for the University of Texas. The DB recruiting kind of been a little shaky. Wardell Mack out of Louisiana was a guy that a guy that Texas, I think, felt really, really confident about landing, and then just out of the blue, bam, he commits to Florida. I don't recall seeing anything about him making a commitment or scheduling a commitment. Maybe I missed it. It's possible. But I think he was a guy that, coming down the stretch, at least here lately, Texas thought they were in real good shape for. Corian Gibson, cornerback out of Lancaster, Texas. He's a guy that Texas was after very hard, and he committed a while back to Clemson. Selman Bridges, another guy, another cornerback that Texas was after, highly sought after by Texas, committed to Arkansas. I think around the same time Corian Gibson committed. And so the only guy left on the board right now is Kobe Black, 5-star out of Waco. Kobe Black does have a crystal ball to Texas, but we've seen those crystal balls not mean shit. And then we've seen guys just commit like completely out of the blue, and nobody ever got a chance to do a crystal ball on them because they just made the day their own, right? There's been rumor the last few days of a silent commit to Texas. A lot of guys think, the initial thought was, it's got to be Brandon Baker, because there's a whole lot of buzz right now about Brandon Baker and the shape that Texas is in with Brandon Baker. But it's not Brandon Baker, at least according to the person that said, I think there's a silent commit. So I think the silent commit at this point, maybe Kobe Black. I don't know. Wide receiver Ryan Wingo, 5-star out of Missouri. Man, Missouri's on fire right now. Just snagged Williams. Man, don't even ask me to say this kid's last name because I will bust it up. 5-star defensive tackle. Right there in the state of Missouri. A lot of Oklahoma fans thought he was going to Oklahoma. I think a lot of people thought he was going to Oklahoma. And then down the stretch, leading up to his commitment, it turned black and gold real quick. I think it couldn't have hurt Missouri that Missouri passed a state law that Missouri high school players could receive NIL money as soon as they sign a letter of intent, which he didn't sign a letter of intent the other day, but he'll sign a letter of intent in December. Maybe he can stay in school, still get paid, finish out his senior year. But Ryan Wingo is another one of those Missouri guys, and a lot of people think Missouri's making up some ground with him. Crystal balls, I'll say Texas at this point. Then you got Brandon Baker out there on the West Coast for Mater D. I think it's kind of been an Oregon-Texas deal this whole time. I think that Texas is the team to beat there. Defensive tackle Dominic McKinley. I think Texas is probably the team to beat there. Defensive end Danny Okoye is a name that I think a lot of Texas fans are familiar with, but he hasn't really, there hasn't really been a lot of talk about, buzz about him in Texas. He came on an official visit. Texas is the only place he's actually gone to an official visit for. He plans to be back on September 16th for the game against Wyoming. So I think that's good news. I didn't know that he had only officialed at Texas to this point. So I think there might be a good shot that Danny Okoye winds up as a Longhorn. He's a 4-star defensive end. Coach Sark, the second he got off the phone with Colin Simmons, started FaceTiming Danny Okoye, talking about recruiting and life and football and guys wanting to come play with Colin Simmons. So we'll see what happens there. And then I think here's another kind of wild one that just came out of nowhere. This is a 2025 guy, wide receiver DeCorian Moore out of Duncanville. We talked last week about how Duncanville is just pumping out D1 talent. Colin Simmons' teammate, Alex January teammate, kid that just committed to LSU's teammate. But he's a 5-star wide receiver, kind of in the mold of Xavier Worthy, kind of in the mold of Jonte Cook. Not a big guy, but lots of speed, lots of suddenness, good hands, obviously. He's a top 5 wide receiver in the country. All of a sudden, nobody knew he was even making an announcement. Bam, LSU. If I'm getting commits, I want to get commits later in the game than earlier in the. I mean, it's cool to say, yeah, we've got this class. It bumped their class up to number 5 or something for 2025. I don't think that one might stick, but I'll tell you what, a lot of commits this early, a year and a half. I mean, this dude still has 2 more seasons of high school football. So I don't know how much stock I'm putting in a commit this early. I think the only prospects where you can really count on a commit this soon is quarterback, maybe. Because I think quarterback is one of those positions where, you don't just load up on quarterbacks, scholarship quarterbacks. You're going to have 3, maybe 4 scholarship guys on your roster. And so if you wait around too long, you're not going to have a home. So I think quarterbacks commit a little bit sooner generally. So I don't think the book is closed on DeCorian Moore. And interestingly enough, in his interview right after committing, oh, yeah, I'm still open. I'm still going to look around. But right now I'm 100% locked in. I don't even know what that means. That's like telling your wife on your wedding day, I'm 100% locked in on you, baby, but I'm going to still look at this other chick and I'm going to still test the waters. He ain't committed. A lot of people were wondering about the Colin Simmons effect, what it would do. Man, we haven't seen it. At least on the surface. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, obviously. But I think the tendency for all fans is as soon as you land a big time commit like Arch Manning we did last year, Colin Simmons, I think the tendency is to believe that that's going to affect a lot of other kids, like immediately. And I just don't think that's the case generally. We didn't really see it with Arch. Aren't really seeing it with Simmons. I think what's going to have an effect on recruiting and even this class is how good of a year Texas has on the field. I think Texas goes out and does what they're capable of doing. I think you're going to see a lot of these guys that Texas was hot and heavy after and continues to recruit through the whistle. I think you're going to see some of those guys flip real late in the cycle. Week 9 opponent, BYU Cougars. 2 Cougars in a row. Houston Cougars on the road in week 8. BYU Cougars at home in week 9. Texas has got to be looking for some payback, and it won't be the players. The players and the coaches won't give a shit about this game from a payback perspective, but I'll tell you what, any Texas fans that watched those games in 2013 and 2014, good Lord, we want some payback. Texas versus BYU is just bringing up all kinds of bad memories. BYU is one of the few schools, and they haven't played that many times. They've only played 5 times, but BYU is one of the few schools that has a commanding, not just winning, but a commanding lead in that series. They've won 4. Texas has won 1. BYU won 2 in the 80s. Texas got 1 in the 90s. And then BYU sandwiched that win with another 2 wins of their own in 2013 and 2014. Last meeting was in 2014. Obviously, BYU just absolutely shithoused Texas in Austin, 41-7. The game in Provo the year before wasn't much better, 40-21. And Taysom Hill, the legend of Taysom Hill, like, really took off in these 2 games. I don't remember if it was the Provo game or the Austin game, but Taysom Hill, like, basically had a broken leg or a torn ACL. Taysom Hill rushed for 259 yards and 3 touchdowns in 2013. Texas gave up 550 yards on the ground in that game. And then Hill backed up the 2013 performance with 134 yards and 3 touchdowns in 2014. The good news was Texas held that vaunted BYU offense to only 300 yards on the ground this time. So the last 2 times Texas and BYU have matched up, BYU has just absolutely jammed the ball straight down Texas's throat, and there was absolutely nothing Texas could do about it. So again, bad memories. Us Texas fans, we want some payback for that. BYU was 8-5 last year in 2022 as an independent. They have 10 returning starters, 4 on offense, 6 on defense. Wide receivers, Keanu Hill, Cody Epps, Chase Roberts combined for 1,300 yards and 16 touchdowns. They're all back for BYU. Isaac Rex added another 320 yards and 6 touchdowns, tight end. And then big tackle Kingsley Suamatea. I think I'm saying that right. Either way, that's a cool name. Defense, they returned defensive end Tyler Batty with 2 sacks and 22 pressures. And then these 2 linebackers, Ben Bywater and Max Tooley, 6 interceptions and 3 touchdowns between them. I was not expecting that stat line looking at their returning linebackers. And then they got lots of depth at DB, really a lot of guys, 6-7 guys that played a lot last year in the defensive backfield are back this year. Key losses on offense, QB Jaron Hall, 3,100 yards, 31 touchdowns. Wide receiver Puka Nakawa, probably butchered that too. 625 yards and 5 touchdowns. And then basically their whole offensive line. Blake Freeland, Harris LaChance, Clark Barrington, all moving on. Key guys gone on defense. Defensive lineman John Nelson and Lorenzo Fati. I'm bad with these names, folks. Those guys combined for 5.5 sacks on the season last year. Keena Peely, 62 tackles from the linebacker position. And then defensive backs, Gabe Judy Lowley and Caleb Hayes had 88 tackles. That's 88 tackles that will not line up for the BYU defense this year. Quarterback is a huge problem, right? But they brought in Caden Slovis, the USC and Pitt transfer. He did all right last year at Pitt. Not anything amazing. I think you look at the outlook for this game, and the one thing we can all pray about as Texas fans and be grateful for is that there is no Taysom Hill. He's gone. He's in the NFL. It's not 2013. It's not 2014. And this 2023 roster is much better than those rosters in 2013 and 2014. One thing about BYU is they're always going to be physical. To me, they kind of remind me of like the Kansas State Wildcats. They're going to be a scrappy bunch, and they're going to be physical. And if you aren't ready, they'll kind of put you in your place like they did in 2013, 2014. So I think Texas is going to have to be prepared to match BYU's physical brand of football. But again, I think this roster is much better suited to do that than it's been in a very long time. It's a home game. Again, I'm going to refrain from actual predictions, but I feel pretty good just on the surface. For looking on paper, I feel pretty good about this game as we head into this season for 2023. Random college football thoughts. Man. So, the blindside scandal. So Orr files a suit that alleges that he was never adopted, but he was tricked into signing this document, making the Tuohys his conservators, which that basically just means they have any right to make deals in his name and without his approval. It's kind of like a power of attorney. The suit goes on to allege that they sold this story to whoever. I think it was Disney. And then kept all the money. He didn't get any of the money. He alleges that the story was all made up anyway. This something's suspicious about all this to me. He said he embarrassingly just found out about this recently, that he wasn't actually adopted. And I guess he has no reason to really lie about it. But also, that just really is surprising to me. If what is alleged in this suit is actually true, like, these Tuohy people are like some of the shittiest people on the planet. I mean, I guess you got to give them credit that they took this kid in. They got him pointed in the right direction, helped him out in life. I mean, all those things are good things. But if they seriously tricked this kid into signing some document that he thought was making them his parents, basically, making them his parents, yeah. If they did that shit and then they took all the money from a made-up lie that they sold to Disney, whoo, that's rough. There's got to be more to this story. I was flipping through TikToks the other day, and the kid was on there, the little nerdy kid that helped him get good at football. Can't remember his name. They actually had him on Barstool, and they were interviewing him, and they were asking the kid. I think this kid alleges that just at some point, just kind of the relationship between Michael Orr and the family just went bad, and he doesn't know why. So they asked him, do you feel like you have a moment where this went bad? And he said, no, I got a text from Michael about something one day, and then like the next day, the whole attitude of the text messages changed, and it was just, I guess, combative from there on. One interesting thing, too, is Michael Orr has a book coming out. Like, I think it came out like the same day this suit got filed. So a cynical person could say, Michael Orr's just trying to drum up some kind of marketing, cheap marketing for his book. I don't know. I think pretty much like anything, the truth about this whole deal lies somewhere in the middle. Obviously, Hollywood's going to embellish. And so the story that we all saw on The Blind Side is probably, even without all this bullshit, is probably not 100% accurate. But it's probably also true that the Tuohys did not trick Michael Oher into signing documents that he thought was them adopting him, and instead making them his conservators. I mean, these folks have, not only they sell this movie, they've turned this whole Michael Oher Save the Kid story into like all kinds of speaking deals and probably book deals. And I mean, they have made a lot of money because of this. I hope we find out the truth. The, what's his name? He's on Unnecessary Roughness. Brandon fucking Ward, I think. Brandon Ward, the loudmouth of college football. I like Brandon Ward, so I say that like that's a term of endearment. Please don't attack me, Brandon Ward fans. But he went on a rant that showed up on TikTok. He knew it was bullshit all along. I don't know. Hope we find out. Speaking of this, Williams Nwaneri, is that how you pronounce his last name? It's got an N. I think the N is always silent, right? Speaking of his commitment, what's up with this Elia Drinkwitz celebration as the whole team is sitting there watching this commitment unfold? He announces he's going to Nwaneri, or he announces he's going to Missouri, and Coach Drinkwitz jumps up into the arms of another man, wraps his legs around him. To me, that's like right up there with the Arkansas coach taking off his shirt at whatever game that was in the NCAA tournament that they won. Jumps up on the table and starts waving his shirt around. Putting your legs around another man in excitement because a kid committed to your school is like that level of cringe for me. I think that's just a terrible. I mean, that's like a man wrapping his legs around another man should only be reserved for like winning $500 million in the lottery or yeah, that's pretty much it. The other interesting thing is a lot of news came out that he's been a silent commit for 3 weeks. So like, what is he actually celebrating? I want to know if he was a silent commit and if Coach Drinkwitz is an attention whore, or if he wasn't a silent commit and Coach Drinkwitz is just super cringe. I want to know the answer. If anybody knows the answer, let me know. One thing we do know is that Oklahoma is getting straight raked over the coals in defensive line recruiting like the last 3 years. They have gotten smashed. It has been a rough time for Oklahoma recruiting, especially at the defensive line position. And that is a huge position of need for Oklahoma. Oklahoma's fixing to go into the SEC, and they don't really have a lot of SEC-type bodies on the defensive line. A few fall camp notes out of the Texas Longhorns fall camp. Arch Manning's in his first scrimmage. He played in the spring game, but this is his first fall scrimmage. And a few sources mentioned that they thought he outplayed the backup Malik Murphy. See if he can continue to do it. I'm still super high on Malik Murphy. I am certainly not an Arch Manning above Malik Murphy. I think Malik Murphy, I absolutely cannot wait to see Malik. I hope the first team offense scores 70 points a game by halftime so we can watch Malik Murphy in the second half. That's how much I like Malik Murphy. I think he is going to be an outstanding quarterback at the collegiate level. I just hope it's here at Texas. But sort of the interesting news about this whole deal is Arch Manning bust off a 50-yard touchdown run on like a 3rd and short. And it broke the internet. You were either Arch is a badass or Texas's defense has got to be terrible if Arch Manning busted off a 50-yard run against him. And I got to admit, my initial reaction, like my visceral, internal, initial emotional reaction was to say, man, our defense must suck if Arch Manning, because I think Arch Manning, I've always thought he was a little athletic, right? He's not like a statue, right? He can run some. But I was like, man, 50 yards and nobody could catch him. But then we hear a couple of pieces of information that we didn't hear originally. Arch hit a GPS speed of 20 miles an hour. I don't know if I believe that, but let's say the machine, the analytics came back and it said 20, and let's say the machines haven't been calibrated and it's a little off. That's still pretty damn fast. So I think young Arch has some speed that we might not have necessarily knew about. And then we find out in the press conference just the other day, Sarkisian says the defense was in man coverage. They all had their backs to the quarterback, and he just kind of made it up through the middle. And then by the time those guys knew what was going on, Arch and his 20-mile-an-hour ass was gone. But Steve said he made a couple plays with his feet, and I think that's promising. I really want to see Quinn Ewers do a little bit more of that. I think Quinn Ewers has more in his legs than he's shown. And I think the more comfortable he gets within the offense, we'll start to see that a little bit. DJ Campbell's another name we heard a ton. We've heard a ton since spring football. DJ Campbell was the highest rated offensive lineman. Yes, folks, he was rated more highly than Kelvin Banks, who had an outstanding season at left tackle last season for Texas. It sounds like DJ Campbell's going to wind up winning the starting right guard spot, which, if you'll recall, late last season, you started seeing DJ Campbell more, and he was pretty monstrous in the run game and had some issues in the passing game. And just like running backs have to be able to block in the passing game, right guards clearly have to be able to block in the passing game. They have to understand where they need to be, who they need to take. In that Baylor game last year, on the play that Quinn Ewers fumbled and Baylor scooped and ran in for a touchdown, DJ Campbell just completely missed. Just completely didn't even block the guy that was standing right in front of him. So I think it took him a while to sort of understand what his role was, really get comfortable with the playbook, get comfortable with all the schemes. But by all accounts, he has now done that. Looks like he's pushed Cole Hudson pretty much out of that right guard position. And Cole Hudson's been splitting reps with Jake Majors at center and Hayden Connor over at left guard. And I feel like that's one of two things. I think they're really trying to figure out if Cole Hudson could be a better center than Jake Majors, which is crazy. Jake Majors is a 3-year starter at center. And Jake Majors is on the Remington Award watch list. And we're talking about how a sophomore, true sophomore, is splitting reps with him and might be pushing him out of his position. But certainly, Kyle Flood is trying to move Cole Hudson around to figure out a spot where he can get him in the game, create some more depth. Kyle Flood's talked about it. He wants 10 guys. He feels like he has 8 today. Got to keep finding depth. Got to find those 9th and 10th guys on that offensive line. So I think that's what Cole Hudson getting bounced around sort of looks like, what it's about. Sark mentioned the pre-snap penalties in his presser the other day, and man, I really hope they get that fixed. You go back and look at that Oklahoma State game last year, and I know Texas fans, and I'm going to get beat up for this by my fellow Texas brethren, because the penalties, well, it was like 12-0. 12 penalties to 1, 12 penalties to 0. These are accepted penalties. Oklahoma State actually did have a personal foul penalty or maybe some kind of big penalty that got declined by Texas. And then they had a procedure penalty that got declined by Texas. So Oklahoma State did get a rag or 2 thrown on them in that game up in Stillwater. But officially, it was like 12 or 13 penalties for Texas, 0 or 1 penalties for Oklahoma State. I don't remember exactly. But if you go back and look at those 12 penalties or 13 penalties Texas had, at least 10 of them were procedure penalties. False starts and offsides by the defense. So you take those things away, and those are things that, I mean, let's just say there's a conspiracy and the Big 12 officials hate Texas and they're trying to screw Texas every single game. Procedure penalties are procedure penalties. You can't move. And the umpires and the refs can't make you move. So every single one of those penalties was a legit penalty. And we saw it a lot last year with Texas. Procedure penalties were rough. And it sounds like they haven't necessarily worked that out yet. I don't like that. The simplest thing in the world is to be a defensive lineman and watch the ball and move when the ball moves. The second simplest thing in the world is to be an offensive lineman and wait to go on the snap count. So I don't know how you fix that. Like, I mean, I think you can continue to rep it. You can continue to put them in situations in fall camp and during scrimmages and, you know, the live sessions where you put them in those types of positions to practice not jumping off sides and to practice not moving before the ball snapped. It would sure suck to have a really good and talented team and fuck around and mess up some games because you can't stay on sides. Young Bucks showing out in scrimmage play. Sark mentioned a lot of them. Jelani McDonald. Jelani McDonald's a kid out of, I believe he's out of Waco. Safety body. I think they recruited him as a linebacker. I think he's actually getting some play at like the nickel position, which the nickel position for Texas is, I mean, you could almost, it's not a linebacker body, but it plays up by the line of scrimmage a lot. It's like a versatile role. They do a lot of different things with that position. Apparently, he had a really good scrimmage. Ant Hill had a really good scrimmage. Malik Muhammad caused 2 turnovers in the scrimmage. Pick 6. Forced a fumble. Derek Williams is another guy that has been repeatedly mentioned. All fall camp. Freshman. All those guys are freshmen. True freshmen. And then on the offensive side, Trey Wisner. And I'm excited to hear that because when the 2023 class got signed and I had seen all those guys play, I was really excited about Trey Wisner. And I said, Trey Wisner, that's my dark horse offensive pick out of this 2023 class. I think I think he's the guy that really nobody's talking about. I think he was a 3-star. But he's super versatile. He can play in the slot. He can play running back. He can cause problems. I see Trey Wisner being a guy that can kind of pick up where Keelan is today. Kind of that third down back, do everything type role in the offense. That's Trey Wisner. Super excited so far. This fall camp about the injury news, there hasn't been a lot. There's been some guys getting nicked up a little bit, but that's to be expected. Your big, fast dudes crashing into each other, you're going to get nicked up. But no serious, knock on wood, no serious injuries so far, and that is awesome. If Texas can get their entire team on the field for Rice, that'll be big time. Big time. RJ Young. I don't know who the fuck RJ Young is. I've seen him on TikTok. I've seen his little shorts go on TikTok. I don't know how famous he is. The video quality looks really good. And he's got a big Fox thing in the background. I don't know if he works for Fox or not. If he does, he should be fired immediately. Because he's upset that Colorado is not in the top 25. Like legit. Not jokingly, is upset that Colorado is in the top 25 of the AP poll. And not only does he think that, but his rationale for it is just staggeringly stupid. He says USC was ranked number 14 in 2022. They were 4-8 the year before. And they had a new coach, and they had a new roster. Deion Sanders has 2 10-win seasons, for God's sake. Shadur Sanders is as talented as Caleb Williams and C.J. Stroud, he says. And he says none of that's a hot take. Colorado should absolutely be ranked. What? What is so polarized? I do not understand. I don't understand what it is about Deion Sanders and Colorado that makes people lose their fucking minds. It's everywhere. It's all over the internet. If you say something negative about Coach Prime, you're going to get lit up by a bunch of people that legitimately think that, like, Colorado's going to play for a Pac-12 championship this year. They legitimately think that, like, Colorado is going to have top 5 recruiting classes soon. They legitimately feel like Coach Prime is going to lead Colorado to the pinnacle of college sports. If it was anyone but Coach Prime, would anybody say that? Folks, Colorado was 1-11 last year. 1-11. And if you go back and look at their schedule and their results, they weren't just 1-11. They got their asses taxed. Like, stomped. Almost every single game. Like, bludgeoned to absolute death like a baby seal. That's what Colorado football was last year. Oh, but he turned over the roster. Oh, those guys aren't there anymore. Man, I don't give a damn who they have there. That roster is not that good. There's a couple of guys on that roster that can play football. There's a couple of outstanding players on that roster. I can admit that. But that roster is not ready in the trenches to go do anything. Certainly not top 25. But Sean, Coach Prime's got 2 10-win seasons. He has 2 10-win seasons in the Southwest Athletic Conference. And he did it with a much better roster than anyone in that league. He was able to get some guys that should have been true D1 players to come to school there. So he had a loaded roster. And he beat up on a bunch of lame duck teams. And probably the stupidest thing this dude said is Shadur Sanders is as talented as Caleb Williams and C.J. Stroud. No, he's not. No, he is not. If Shadur Sanders was that good, he wouldn't have ever played at Jackson State. He wouldn't have needed Coach Prime to go be the head coach at Jackson State so he could get on the field immediately. I wonder if the viewership or the following for RJ Young just went down the shitter and he had to say something just completely asinine to get people to pay attention to him anymore. The Vegas line for wins for Colorado next season, I guess we could say this season, we're about here. I mean, it's still technically next season, but we're getting there. We might as well be there. We got polls to argue about and people saying dumb shit. LSU fans talking about people's drunk coaches and crying because so-and-so committed somewhere and it wasn't their school. And we got all that shit. We got all the just completely ridiculous takes happening. So it's absolutely football season. They're supposed to win. The over-under is 3.5 games. That's Vegas, folks. And I don't think Vegas thinks that. I don't think they set that line thinking that most people were going to pick under 3.5 wins. To even all that money out. So in other words, Colorado is nowhere near a top 25 team. This roster that he rebuilt at Colorado, which you can say it's rebuilt. It's not rebuilt. It's patched. That Joker lost 51 dudes off his team in like a 3-week time period. His roster is patched. It is not anywhere close to anything resembling nearly as good as the USC roster was in 2022. And the other piece, man, I don't think Deion Sanders is that good of a coach. I don't think Coach Prime is as good of a coach as Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley's got his problems. He struggled in certain situations. But if you step back, look at his record, generally speaking, Lincoln Riley's been pretty highly successful as a head coach at the elitist of levels. Not Southwest Athletic Conference. Coach Prime gets a chance to prove it. And if he does prove it, I'll be one of the first people to go on public record and say I was wrong. Coach Prime proved me wrong, but I just don't see it. I don't think he's that good of a recruiter. I think he's all hype. Hype goes away after a while. If you can't produce something, hype doesn't mean anything. RJ Young, man, go get help. Check us out Thursday. We'll talk about Week 10 opponent, the Kansas State Wildcats. A lot of people think Texas and Kansas State might wind up in the Big 12 championship game, so that'll be a big one. Position crews, we left out the special teams. We'll talk a little bit about special teams on Thursday. Maybe we'll have some recruiting updates. See what happens in the world of recruiting. We'll definitely have fall camp updates. And then surely somebody else is going to say something real stupid, or I don't know. There'll be some other scandal we can talk about on Thursday. Subscribe to YouTube. Check out the podcast, Buzzsprout, Twitter, TikTok, Horn Takes. You can find us at all of these social media things with Horn Takes. Email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your comments, questions, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. You guys have a good rest of the week. We'll see you Thursday, 6 p.m. Central. Hook 'em.